Welcome, everyone.
Welcome.
My name is Jesús Rodríguez, and we today are trying to initiate a series of talks among Orinoco Tribune Editorial team because we believe that sharing our ideas with others might help others to clarify their own ideas on certain issues. So today we have Steve Lalla, which is our oldest contributor in the editorial room of Orinoco Tribune. And soon we're going to have Saheli Chowdhury, that is one of also of the oldest in the team. And also we have Kahlil Wall-Johnson that is with us. You cannot see him, but he's there. And we have Dana Daily, that is also one of our recent additions, and Robert Quinones, that is also one of our recent additions to the team. And we today want to have this first talk about an issue. Maybe a lot of people are questioning, why are you not talking about Ukraine, which is the issue right now? And I would say that we believe that the whole freedom convoy has been like closed unexpectedly due to the Ukrainian crisis. And we believe that we need to like have a small talk about the convoy because of that. So today, what we're going to try is to have an open talk among the Orinoco Tribune Editorial team about those issues connected or related to the freedom, the Canadian Freedom Convoy. So we are going to try to talk about the different causes, sources around the convoy. Then we're going to try to dissect the different political issues, tendencies within that movement. Then we're going to try to talk about the status, the current status of the convoy movement. We're going to jump from there to the international repercussions of that phenomenon in the US, Europe, and Latin America. And then we're going to try to have like some questions like dialectical analysis on the whole phenomenon that happened in Canada. So just to begin with the first part, I would say that I believe that what we saw in that convoy is like a mix of different things that somehow got together and make the whole movement explode. Of course, that's the way I see it from down here in Venezuela. But we have a Steve that lives in Canada that have a better understanding of that situation. But from my perspective here in Venezuela, I saw like it was a response to the crazy pandemic exhaustions that most of humanity had already in December last year. But also it was a response of the excessive COVID-related social restrictions in Canada that, from what I hear from friends in Canada, was really excessive. And then we have the anti-vaxxer movement that also is an important part of the whole scene. And also, from my perspective, connects a lot with leftists. And I believe that there are a lot of left people, I mean, people from the left that, jump or were since the beginning already within the anti-vax movement. And they just saw with the convoy an opportunity to express themselves, to explode, to share their feelings. So that's how I see it. And of course, we have then the anti-communist people in the convoy. We have the facts of the foreign founding and the media coverage that magnify and somehow how do you say that in English? I forgot the word in English, but they put the convoy in like a fairy tale. They put them like a I don't know the exact word.
Romanticize it.
Exactly, they romanticize the whole thing. So that's what I believe should discuss in this first part. I'm sure that maybe some of you have some thoughts or ideas or another perspective. So go ahead. Feel free to jump in, anyone.
Yeah, there's definitely different views of what the trucker convoy constituted. I think you can characterize those perspectives as splits on the left. We definitely saw two diverging views from the left. One, that this was a legitimate grassroots workers movement. And the second narrative was basically the opposite, that this was an AstroTurf far-right movement. Obviously, there's a lot of space in between those two opinions also. I think it's also important to emphasize the splits on the right. Obviously, if you just follow mainstream media, it's easy to get caught up in these so-called splits on the left, but there's also splits on the right happening. And I think it's instructive to view the, just as we can, the January 6th uprising, for example, in the US, it's easy to view the truckers convoy also as a split among the, let's say, the ruling elite or Canada's white privileged class. You have more extremist versions of this class, and then you have you know, maybe what would be characterized as Trudeau and the liberal perspective, and the two of them are clashing very visibly in public for everyone to see, and making a big media splash. Someone else maybe wants to comment on that.
Go ahead, guys.
I think there's a lot of people that also jumped in on it that didn't really understand like what was happening or why it was happening. And I think the alarming part was people not understanding that and being okay with it. Still going out and being a part of it while not really doing the work to understand what were the forces behind it.
One question, Steve. So you are saying that split on the right is between those that support Trudeau, and which is the other? Which are the others?
Well, if you would draw the analogy with the US, it would be, you know, between Republicans and Democrats. And in Canada, again, it's a simplification, but in Canada, that split is between the liberals and the conservatives, let's say. And you know, again, I don't want to characterize or simplify the Freedom Convoy as being all conservatives. I don't think it's really fair to do that, but it was really obvious to see the politicians in Canada that did come out and, you know, lend a bit of support to it, whether it was Pierre Poilievre of the Conservative Party, or Maxime Bernier, which is he's from like a splinter of the Conservative Party, which is even more conservative, the People's Party. But, you know, even within the Conservative Party of Canada, there was a very marked split on this subject. And maybe a lot of people outside of Canada aren't aware, but during the time of the Freedom Convoy, the Conservative leader of the Conservative Party, O'Toole, he resigned. Largely, it was seen because he was not supporting this Freedom Convoy, that he was sort of like a moderate conservative, let's say, that they had put forth as their candidate to run against Trudeau in the election, which is very recent, as what, like 6 months ago or something. It's very recent. And he had lost that election, even though they got more votes than the Liberals, but they jettisoned him, and now they are without a leader. And it's possible that their next leader will be someone who is even more conservative, such as this Pierre Poilievre character, who did come out and support the convoy, although he sort of walked back on that a little bit later. But it's not clear who's going to be the next leader. It might also be this Jean Charest, who's a very centrist. He's actually a former liberal, you know.
We have listened. We have in the second part of the second point of our skeleton for today's talk, and that section about the liberal conservatism. And I believe that maybe then we can talk more in depth about that, because I believe that there is a fake dichotomy within, especially within the liberal conservative confrontation. But right now, why don't we just try to, because what you say about the left, you know, cracks is important. I believe that show, I mean, the Canadian, the Freedom Convoys somehow show some cracks that every one of us already have noticed within the left, between those that are okay with science and those of us that are against, maybe it's hard, it's excessive, exaggerate to say against science, but those are that are leftists that are against vaccines and that are against mask mandates and any kind of mandates. So I believe that is an important debate, because we notice it, and we, for example, in Orinoco Tribune, we published some stuff that was immediately criticized by other, you know, leftist outlets out there, saying that what we posted was like an exaggeration, and I don't know. I believe that we need to make a difference between, that's my opinion, between our position on COVID-related issues and our political, you know, stand. And I believe that that's important. I don't know what you guys think about that, but I believe that it's important to reflect a little bit on that, because I felt somehow during those days a bit like surprised by the responses of some outlets and some good writers out there. I don't know.
I don't know. I'm interested in this topic as well, because you're right. There were a lot of splits concerning COVID mandates, and there is like a sector of people who are against them. They think that they're like tyrannical, and that's the impression that I get from these convoys, especially the one which we could talk about, like what Stephen had talked about, how there's an element of being AstroTurf, because just like how there's the Canadian ones, we saw the American ones come after, and then now there's like Brazilian ones. But these all have this libertarian kind of impression of saying that the government is not doing enough, or no, the government is doing too much, that they're imposing against our rights. But I would say, like, when you say that, like, we have to separate the idea that like COVID, our stance on the COVID mandates or COVID itself is separate from the political. I would say that the COVID pandemic is a political pandemic. So when I see people go and be like, oh, the government is doing too much or whatever, it makes me uncomfortable. It makes me feel like that movement is against me, because I feel like the government is doing, I feel like the government should do more, that too many people are dying, that we should have more responsibility with, like, from above to take care of the general people. So yes. I do see the split on the left being like, no, we have to reach the convoy, we have to reach the truckers, that's where the masses are at, we have to talk to them or whatever. But I feel like that's an element, and we could talk about this, but it's like a backwards element that we should isolate. It's more of like I don't want to ramble, but
that's true. I mean, I don't know if you want to add something, Dana. I see you like wanting to say something.
I feel like it's all done under this banner of freedom, but everyone's just interested in like this individual freedom and like not like this like social responsibility or collective responsibility. And yeah, as for the people who are anti-mask, I find that like crazy, because we see like in the US or the UK where it's not mandatory in like indoor spaces or people don't take it seriously, and we see that there's been so many more deaths in those places, and it's like at the end of the day it's like no one likes to put it on, but it's like this, it's a bit uncomfortable, but if it helps the overall well-being, it's fine.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
You know, I would point out too that as a lot of other people point out that yes, the vaccine mandates were clearly a big an important point here for the trucker convoy, but we can look at it a little differently also, that it was, you know, the truckers and many Canadians were forced to go back to work. And some of them risk losing their jobs if they didn't get vaccinated. And the social programs that were there to protect people, especially early in the pandemic in Canada, which were considerable, were no longer here anymore. Which meant that if, you know, a trucker or a healthcare worker or a transportation worker chose not to get vaccinated, they would lose their job without any you know, chance of finding a new job, or I mean, I guess no special compensation in any way. So I think it's important to keep in context also that the people that are, you know, fighting against vaccine mandates aren't necessarily fighting against social programs and against government intervention, although that was the view that was most emphasized, seemed to be, you know, a libertarian, leave the government out of everything. That was definitely one of the views that was in there. Maybe the leaders of the organization that were promoted the most might have characterized this position, but it doesn't mean that everyone that was involved or that supported it called for less government intervention. And I think it's important to kind of recontextualize this, as people wouldn't have been so pissed off and angry and exhausted with the pandemic if people had continued to be provided the social programs and the social security that would have allowed them to, you know, take responsible actions.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And I would add that now that we're talking about the libertarian nature of the part of the, you know, causes of the movement, I would say that there's a lot of, I consider myself a person that respects science, but there's a lot of mistrust about the way the pandemic was handled by, especially in the US, by government officials colluded with big pharma companies. And that creates a lot of distrust on the people, on the vaccines and on the medicines overall that has been approved to fight the pandemic. And, you know, I believe that all those things are out there. So, I mean, we're already out there at the moment of the convoy. I mean, when the convoy was being born, if one could say that. And I believe that those were also part of the reasons, you know, the distrust on the government, on big pharma, on the excessive mandates, as you say, and I didn't consider that, Steve, on the stuff in the social, you know, economical help for those ones that were stuck at home and needed to go to work. So I believe that that's give us a good understanding of the causes. And I want now to jump to the political, I call it how to dissect different political tendencies or different issues within the movement. And we already already start talking about that, you know, about the libertarians, about the anarchist perspective on the, you know, I don't want the state to rule my life. I don't want any state, and I want to be free, and I want to decide what to do or not to do. That's part of those, you know, political tendencies. And of course, I believe that that's one of them, that is the most visible one. But what do you say about other guys? What other tendencies do you see there?
I generally see the basic like libertarian kind of elements. I do see, well, I want to say that there is the people who got involved with the movement, and I always see that there are always genuine concerns when people get involved with these kind of things. I kind of liken it to color revolutions in other places, you know what I'm saying? Like in
let's go there.
Hong Kong and stuff like that. So it's like, those are general grievances, but like this movement itself has elements of like, or what is the interest of the movement itself? What is the ending goal of it? And does it serve the people? That's where I want to sum up that, like whether or not to support something. What are its goals? What does it provide? Does it progress like the leftist goals that we have, the socialist goals? Like that being said, I can only see like the leftist elements in there as kind of like peppered in. I generally see it as like a right-wing libertarian anti-communist movement. But then again, I am in America, and I just really like I've only been fed like the most American ones, the most recent like American version of that. And the flags they're wearing, it's like the yellow snake, don't tread on me, the Blue Lives Matter flag, like all those flags, whenever I see them, I'm like, oh, I gotta go. That's not for me.
Who else?
Let me just point out too that I think what Rob is alluding to is you know, as we were mentioning before, kind of a lot of splits in the leftist perspective of whether this was a true grassroots protest, and whether, like you said, leftists have the responsibility of going down into the protests and listening to the demands of the workers. And this question of whether or not the left should support this movement, essentially. And I mean, I think it's really important to try to find common elements and refuse to allow the left, be it socialists, communists, whatever, even libertarians to a certain degree, and anarchists that are sometimes considered to be on the left. It's important to try to find common ground so that we can unite against capitalism, which most of us agree is the primary contradiction. So in that sense, I would say there's a difference between supporting something like the trucker convoy, you know, getting out there on social media and saying, you know, I support the flags that they're flying. There's a difference between outright support and on the other hand, acknowledging that it's a good idea to try to reach these participants and these voices that are being heard. And I think we can all agree that whether it's, you know, Trump supporters, trucker convoy participants that are often characterized as right-wing, there's a lot of real grievances that are being, legitimate grievances that are being aired by these groups, and it's not helpful at all to any revolutionary or progressive movement to just totally ignore those concerns because we don't want to support the flags that are being waved and so on by the convoys. So that's the difficult situation we find ourselves in, I think.
I agree.
Hi, Saheli. Welcome, Saheli. Great to have you here.
Welcome, Saheli.
No, it's okay. I am sorry that I'm terribly late.
No, don't worry, don't worry. Listen, now that you mentioned, I mean, I believe that at the beginning, I was not aware of the, anti-communist stand of some people within the convoy. But then talking with you and talking with other people in Canada, I realized that there was really some, a movement within the convoy of people claiming it as an anti-communist movement. And one of the things that you didn't see too much in the media was the scene about Trudeau being a communist. So that's part of the whole mess that was created, within the convoy, freedom convoy movement, because, I mean, they tried to let some people, maybe those that are not politically trained, to believe that Trudeau is communist and that he is the son of Fidel. So what do you say about that?
Yeah, personally, I think it's an issue of like these kind of people. We have them in America too, where it's like everything that they don't like is communism. You know what I'm saying? Like mask wearing is communism. Whatever is bad is communist. They'd be like, Joe Biden's a communist, and I'm like, I wish, man, but I agree with what's being laid out with what Steven said, like that we have to engage the people where they're at and their actual grievances. But I think the convoy takes that energy and diverts it to a different cause. Yeah.
Okay, so
yes, I share that. I share that. Another scene is
wait. I want to hear what
Saheli.
Yeah.
Okay, so now actually when the trucker convoy started, I had asked Steve that what were their demands, because like there wasn't much in mainstream media, was just claiming that they were something bad, and the other side also was claiming that it was something bad. So what were the demands? And then it turned out that most of them were only talking about the vaccines and stuff, whereas in case, I mean, the pandemic, what it brought was like it brought the inequalities to the foreground, right? We could see them. So there must have been a lot of inequalities in Canada also. Like I had seen photos and videos of homeless people's tents being dismantled by the police. So it at the time of the beginning of like 4 or 5 months within the pandemic, and telling them to go home where they did not have home. That is because of the reason that they did not have home, that they were outside in tents and they were being told to go home, maintain social distancing, and they did not have those privileges. Like housing is a you could see that in a first world country, and one that tries to brand itself as very progressive, isn't there housing is a privilege and not a right. So that sort of thing, that I mean, if somebody was protesting against the inequalities that pandemic brought before us, that should have been a legitimate protest, and not just we don't want to vaccines. I mean, I can understand the pharmaceutical companies are making a profit, but they are making a profit precisely because the capitalist system exists, and all these things are related. The homelessness, the fact that people of the global south could not access vaccines, that the ventilators and stuff for which they had already paid were stolen from airports by countries that did not pay for themselves, but that had the power to hoard them and things like that. So people were not protesting against these, and were protesting just, we don't want to get vaccinated and go into the US. Like we would go into the US without whatever rules there are, like without respecting the rules of another country. That's also problematic. So these are the problems that I could see mostly from the very beginning of the convoy, that made me question what its intentions were. And then of course I read all those, like who are the organizers, who are the financiers, and I could understand that okay, it must be a very right wing, like Trudeau is no left-wing person, of course not. He is capitalist and imperialist, and these people were even further to the right of him. So that was something that I understood like within a few days.
Yes, good say, Saheli. I also wanted to raise the issue of what I mentioned before, that liberal conservative fake dichotomy, that I associate a lot with that dichotomy, I don't know how you say it in English, between the Republicans and the Democrats in the US. During that discussion early this year about the Capitol Hill coup d'etat or riots, however you want to call it, and I remember I somehow feel that there is some sort of relation between that and the Canadian convoy in the sense of that alleged dichotomy, that the Trumpists are the bad ones and that the liberals in the Democratic Party are the good ones, and all that distraction that some people in the US, friends of us, let me see, that is fake. I mean, it's a fake dichotomy that, yes, it's like a circus, it's like to distract people out of the main issues that they should worry about. For example, in the US, distract them distract people in the US from who is running the country. Who is taking the decisions and who is at the end of the day pushing all the strings within the system to make more money, like in the US, like as we know, the capitalist class, the oligarchy, which that is a real oligarchy of the world. So I have the impression that what happened within this is not. I'm not saying that what you just said, Saheli, and all of you have a lot of a sense. I mean, I believe that there are respectable positions within that movement that people have to pay attention to. But I believe that somehow in countries like the US and Canada, they create these distractions in order to have the people distracted in other things less important than the relevant things on like seeing the cracks in the economy, or seeing how the wealthy class, the oligarchy, make more money at the expense of the ones that are getting poorer every day. So I don't know, I just wanted to share that because I believe that that's there.
I think that's really relevant. Yeah, I think that's really relevant. And I had the same impression too, that the convoy is a part of this wave of it's like dissatisfaction with the system. It's the same dissatisfaction that we on the left feel. We are dissatisfied with capitalism, but it omits the class analysis. It omits the economic arrangement. And I could speak less about the convoy, well, understanding its goals. I would say that it shares that, but the January 6th movement, that's like a very dangerous kind of movement. I wouldn't even say that it's like a distraction. It's more of like it's like part of a growing right-wing kind of movement in America that's not based in class analysis. It's based in like like QAnon, like conspiracy stuff, man. It's crazy, and I think that what we're seeing is with the billionaire oligarchs, they're more willing to get behind the trucker protests, get behind these kind of elements that went to the January 6th movement, because they know that the general dissatisfaction of the population is a threat to them, and they rather invest into something that isn't threatening to them. You get what I'm saying? Because we have an understanding that we have a class analysis, right? We understand that they're the problems, but January 6th people, trucker convoy people, they don't have that analysis, so they want to invest in that movement, you know.
That makes sense. Yes.
And I think that we can see that like all over in the imperialist countries.
Do you want someone gonna add something?
I'll say something, which is that when Donald Trump came into power in 2016, we heard this talk about the Overton window, and shifting to the right, and I think we also hear sometimes this statement, which is formulated in a variety of ways, which is something to the effect that the promotion of far right and fascist news or happenings or political movements, it benefits the capitalist ruling elite in so many ways. There's so many ways, because it shifts the conversation away from any alternative to capitalism, while mobilizing, like Rob said, while mobilizing people against the billionaires. I mean, let's not forget that, you know, Donald Trump won because somehow people felt that this was going to be different from the regular Democrats, even though obviously you're dealing with a businessman here, but people that support a sudden break from the system, it's often because they're venting their anger also against the oligarchy. Maybe they don't imagine that there's an alternative to capitalism that's possible, which is, you know, that idea that we live in a capitalist reality inevitably. So I think it's important to remember that the promotion of this, let's call it neo-fascism. I'm just saying that other people have described it as neo-fascist. Gerald Horne was one that I was recently reading. The Canadian Communist Party described this as a neo-fascist movement. It really benefits the Joe Bidens and the Trudeaus and the so-called liberals also, because all of a sudden they're able to step in and without in any way challenging capitalism and present themselves as more palatable to progressives or people that, I mean, again, that are obviously fighting against conservatism and radical conservatism. So
listen, and there's also another thing that create a lot of frictions within the leftists, in relation to the Freedom Convoy, which is at the end of the situation, the Canadian government trying to put order within the craziness of what they allow to happen, and then they announcing this the Emergency Act is the name, Steve?
Emergency Measures Act, yes, that's what it's called now.
Exactly, and that of course created a lot of criticism, within the left, saying, you see, guys, we told you that you had to support the Canadian convoy, and now you, the leftists that were against it, now are somehow to blame for these draconian measures that Trudeau is implementing against the people. And I believe that we should somehow stop there and try to get into that. I mean, from the way I see it, there's no relation on criticizing the Freedom Convoy and opposing at the same time that crazy strategy of Trudeau's government of implementing this urgent emergency act or whatever. So I believe that there's no contradiction between those two things, but among some leftists, that was like the climax of the whole, way to blame some leftists for not supporting the movement. you say about that?
Well, actually, like
I mean, I could, Sally, maybe go ahead.
no. I was just saying that is why I had shared that statement from the Communist Party of Canada, which had condemned both the convoy and the emergency acts and every other step that Trudeau and his government took in order to suppress the protests. That's it. Like, if someone is really on the left, they would understand these positions.
I
Of course,
agree
I do
with
not
you.
know. I do not know what is the political formation in Canada, or if there is any. So Steve can tell us about that.
Well, I mean, we could go on and on this topic forever. There's so many nuances. A lot of it is related also to conversations about January 6th. There's so many questions. I think the main one is, why was the Emergency Measures Act invoked? Because we've seen massive repression of huge protests across Canada over the last 50 years since a similar act was last invoked. They didn't need to invoke that act to arrest thousands of people, 3,500 people that were arrested in Montreal in 2012 in the anti-tuition hike protests. We didn't see them invoke it to arrest the Wet'suwet'en land defenders. We didn't see them invoke it even for the Oka crisis here, where 2 people were killed during a 77-day standoff. So, first of all, of course, it's obvious that these repressive measures are going to be used against the left. I mean, there's no doubt about that. We all know that, and it's dangerous to encourage an imperialist capitalist government to invoke these types of measures. But more importantly, and this is where the comparison to January 6th is obvious to a lot of people, I think, we understood that on January 6th that there was some type of internal collaboration with the security forces on the Capitol grounds with the demonstrators, and we saw over and over how easy it was for them to get in, how there was almost no barricades when compared to other protests. And that's really important in the context of this trucker convoy, because it wasn't a protest in the middle of the woods in British Columbia or on stolen land. This was a protest right on the Capitol grounds, which should be the most highly defended area of the country. But for some reason, the Ottawa police were unable or unwilling, I think is what a lot of people realized. They were unwilling to get in there and break it up. And this is a scary idea, just as it is in the States, to think that perhaps there was a large contingency of the security forces that are perhaps extremist Christian white nationalists, as we've heard them described, that were really supporting QAnon's narratives. They didn't end up winning, let's say, because at the last minute, there was a split within Trump's party. And maybe you can elaborate better on this, Rob. I think Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence ended up sort of taking the keys away from Trump. But I think it's obvious that in coming months, this is going to start to be explored and understood a little better in Canada. What exactly happened within the Ottawa police force? How long was this arranged beforehand? We're seeing articles now that indicate that the leaders had been sharing documents with the Ottawa police, that the Ottawa police fully knew that they were going to be coming en masse and staying for longer than 3 days, because they originally said, oh, they're just going to be there for 3 days. And then after they kept staying, the Ottawa police said, oh, well, we didn't know that they were going to keep staying beyond 3 days. But now it's pretty clear that there were elements collaborating with the demonstrators, obviously supporting them on social media posts and everything. And we saw the head of the Ottawa police resign halfway through the demonstration. So when you're talking about comparisons to color revolutions, we could, I think a comparison to the Euromaidan of 2014 is maybe appropriate too, since we're all talking about Ukraine lately. These might seem exaggerated, and I think to a large degree they are, because the degree of violence is not comparable at all. But it's maybe an instructive way to explore.
Listen, we have a comment in Facebook. It's from Mauricio. It says, fully wrong. The use of masks didn't help to keep the numbers of infections and deaths down. Do not mislead people. You know, I mean, that's an evidence on how polarizing this whole scene is, and how
Actually,
connected this whole scene is with the COVID, you know, crisis.
we didn't
Kahlil,
even
buenas
say.
tardes. I wanna see Kahlil.
Yeah, he's
Yeah, what's
there.
up?
Kahlil,
Yeah,
I don't
what's
see
up?
you. Now
Can
I
you hear
see
me
you.
now?
Yes.
Well, I was just wondering with all of this, because we kind of got a sneak peek into things in Canada that we don't usually see. And it's hard for me to figure out how serious some of the Trudeau theories about Castro, but also these like proposals for reorganizing territory are, just as, yeah, outside of Canada, there's really no way to gauge how seriously they're taken.
If I can comment again, and because this is where I live, but please make me shut up after this for a little while. But I think, you know, I'm in Quebec, and you have to put this in the context of the Quebec Sovereigntist or Separatist movement, which is a very real thing. You know, we had a referendum here in 1994, whether or not Quebec would separate, and if I'm not mistaken, the final result was 51% said no and 49% said yes. And if that had gone in favor of the yes, you know, Quebec would be its own country right now. So in that context, the potential is there. Whether, you know, these diagolon movements and Wexit, I'll be honest, as a Canadian, I never heard of these movements until the trucker convoy. Only then did I realize that there's actually a movement of people that want to separate the oil-rich areas of Canada away from the rest of it. Again, they seem, I hate using the word fringe, but they really do seem like fringe and very small portions of the population that would think like that rationally. But again, the comparison with Ukraine is a good one. We know that the fascist right sector and Svoboda party in Ukraine constitute about 2% of the voter intention, and they're like almost an irrelevant party on the political spectrum, but they mobilize an important part of the military, and when things are done that they don't agree with, they're going to get out there in the streets with guns, and they're going to be violent, and they're going to threaten people's lives. And I think that's a very real threat in Canada, just like it is in the States, that these small minorities of people can exercise a large amount of power in the narrative. So I'll try to give the floor to someone else.
Listen, I wanted to add something. I mean, is there a new political trend in Canada coming out of this convoy scene? I mean, is something already clear? I mean, can be seen right now in the political spectrum in Canada?
Well, I wouldn't say it's brand new. I'd say it's part of it's part of an ever evolving tendencies that have been there for years. Like I said, the People's Party, or PCP, I don't even get their name right all the time, which is led by Maxime Bernier, was probably one of the most vocal supporters of this convoy. Maxime Bernier split away from the Conservative Party of Canada in, I believe, 2018, and is generally viewed as being more to the right. So that happened in 2018. In 2014, already a lot of the organizers that were behind the Freedom Convoy organized this yellow vests movement that was also supported by, you know, extremist conservatives, let's say, or extreme right conservatives. And a lot of, you know, analysts will say that Canada mirrors the United States politics. So without a doubt, when Trump came into power, a lot, you know, we had a candidate back then for the Conservative Party, Andrew Scheer, who ran in the election against Trudeau in 2019, I want to say, or maybe 2018, that he was much more extremist than O'Toole, who recently resigned. Andrew Scheer, like O'Toole, got more votes than the Liberals, but the Conservatives again did not win the election, and Trudeau was reelected at that time once again. So I don't think it's necessarily, it's not a new thing. It's something that's growing, that's been there, and that I think we see the same dynamics at work in the political parties as we can easily see in the United States. You know, that's much more, the world stage understands that.
And do you
process.
see, Steve, libertarians and leftist people moving towards that direction?
Generally, I would say no. Okay. Maybe there might be some libertarians that would vote for conservative parties, but generally speaking, I would say no. You know, and leftists, no. I mean, maybe there's a lack of the left and an inability to capture some of the real grievances of the constituency. Maybe people, you know, not everyone views politics as a simple left-right spectrum. I mean, let's remember that too. Not everyone is identifying themselves as, you know, oh, I'm on the left, therefore I have to vote for the NDP or whatever. It's not always so simple.
That's simple. Yes, that's true. And what about the international repercussions? Because we saw those things in France, in the UK, and then the announcement of that DC convoy. That I don't know what happened with it, because during those days, the whole Ukrainian crisis exploded. And also people talk, you just mentioned, Rob, about Brazil. I didn't know that something happened in Brazil. Can you give us some information about that, Sahi, Bob? Rob?
Yes. Well, actually, in Brazil, there were two trucker convoys in 2 different years. The first one was in 2016, just when Dilma Rousseff had been removed by that parliamentary coup. So at the time, there was and Michel Temer replaced her, and he was a neoliberal. So he very quickly reversed a lot of her progressive, more left-wing policies, social policies. So at that time, there really was a sort of economic collapse in Brazil, everybody knows. So there were real grievances, economic one, just like in case of Canada, many truckers had that sort of grievances, I believe. So they also had these grievances, and there was this small trucker protest. It started as a protest against Temer's new economic liberalizations, but the extreme right, the Bolsonaristas, ended up capturing that. Okay, so it became, very soon it turned into something right-wing. And there are also indications, I read these things in Brazil Wire and other places, that the Atlantic Council funded group, Renova BR, had a lot of, Renova Brazil had a lot of things to do with it. It had started these movements since 2014, since the re-election of Dilma, and had continued until Bolsonaro was elected. So it was, it was a US funded thing in case of Brazil, though it had this, on the face, it was a Brazilian thing, a right-wing Brazilian thing. Even conservative, they identified themselves as conservatives, but you know what conservatives are in Latin America. They are extreme right all the time. So this was one protest that was in 2016. And then recently in 2021, in September, there was again another trucker protest, which was led, among other people, by Bolsonaro's own son, Eduardo Bolsonaro. And at that time, you remember the Supreme Court had declared some of the cases against Lula as invalid and had discarded them. Orinoco Tribune published this news, but what it did not publish was that at the time there was also a trucker protest organized by Bolsonaro's son and some other people that had tried to invade the Supreme Court. It could not do it, there weren't many people. there weren't that many people. They had paid, and even then, not that many people turned up. So it fizzled out within a few hours. So that was one thing. So these were the
Okay.
two protests that happened in Brazil.
But the two ones, I mean, those two happens before the Canadian one, right?
When did the Canadian one happen? The Canadian one happened more
December.
recently, right? Yeah. So yeah,
Yes.
those two happened before. One happened in 2016, a long time before, like 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And the other was in 2021 September, early September, because that ruling came on 7th September, I think. So it started happening that day, 6th and 7th.
But it makes sense what you say about maybe the U.S. behind, those convoys in Brazil, and maybe as we know.
I don't know what about the 2021 one, because there wasn't much news. Well, there was news, but there wasn't much wasn't much excitement about it. But the 2016 one was definitely paid by the US, because there are documents and there were leaks showing that Atlantic Council had vehemently promoted with a lot of articles, those things. And yes, I mean, like a lot of bad things started happening starting from 2014. It was NED that funded RenovaBR. So one can usually see, I mean, one can very easily see that it was the US government, because NED is the US government funding, right? So it was exactly NED, and there were, I don't know if other were involved, like USAID or stuff, but NED definitely was giving money to RenovaBR. Like all of it, all its big spokespersons, etc., were trained in the US. Like they spoke English with the international media.
My question is that, I mean, would it be like possible that maybe if I hope that Ukrainian war stop. That's my hope. Like, I believe that the hope of everyone. But when that happened, do you think that someone might try to reignite this whole scene in other countries? Do you think that it makes sense? I mean, that it will be helpful even for right-wing interests? Anyone?
I think that it might not manifest the same way, especially since gas prices are crazy. They might not want to do no convoy, but
yes. That's true.
I think that when you take in, like we were talking about January 6th, Maidan and the trucker convoy, this is just like these right-wing elements like being in a process of like swelling up. It might not be a convoy, but they're definitely mobilizing, especially when the conditions is going to get crazier. Like the political context in which these things happen is going to have an effect on like how they react. So we can definitely expect something. Convoy, don't know, but something for sure.
What about Spain, Dana? Did those processes in France, trying to replicate the convoy, have some repercussion in Spain?
I haven't seen anything.
Okay.
I haven't seen anything.
So no protests, no. I believe that there were some protests, right? Against
contra the. Yeah, right? Of course. Yeah.
During those days.
A lot of anarchists here. Yeah. Against the curfew and the masks and everything.
But nothing with trucks.
No, there's no room, I don't think.
Okay. And now it's going to be, as Rob says, it's going to be harder with the prices of gas at the levels that they have right now. Yeah. Let's jump to the last part of the talk. Go ahead, Steve.
I would love to interject on this, and I think it might sort of segue into our next topic also, that now the trucker convoy program is being extended across the US. These truckers have been circling Washington, DC. It hasn't got, I don't think, the type of international coverage that Canada's did. We don't see masses of demonstrators. And I would love to get into the actual numbers of demonstrators also in Canada if we have time to do that. But
Yes.
the U.S. deployed, I think, 700 to 800 National Guards people to defend the Capitol grounds, and the truckers don't seem to be going there. They're just driving around in circles and disrupting traffic. But I think it's very interesting to see the Washington Post, for example. What is that? Jeff Bezos's company. That during the Canadian Freedom Convoy, Washington Post was calling Canada authoritarian and publishing articles, kind of explaining that the trucker convoy voiced legitimate demands against the draconian Trudeau measures. And now when you read their coverage of these outlets about the trucker convoy, you could see all of a sudden the tone has completely changed. And they don't in any way support they're making fun of the trucker convoys for protesting against mandates that don't exist in the States and calling them ineffective and so on. So this was one of those rare, very rare situations historically where during the Canada trucker convoy, we saw a difference between the way it was covered in US mainstream and Canadian mainstream outlets like CBC or Global that are always usually just echoing the US imperialist line in terms of foreign policy. But in this case, all of a sudden, we saw the US press publishing articles saying that the trucker convoy was majority funded by US donors, and publishing articles saying, that basically that there were a bunch of anti-vaxxers and couldn't be taken seriously and so on. Whereas in the US, we saw Fox News coming out right out in support of the convoy, and even echoing these hilarious accusations that Justin Trudeau was the illegitimate son of Fidel Castro, as Tucker Carlson said he fully believed on air, without even cracking a smile. So this I think this split between mainstream media narratives, it's funny to see, and it has to be it helps you to see clearly who these outlets are working on for the interests of.
Yes, that's true. Someone else want to add something about that? Because I want to jump to the last part of the interview about, asking questions about, for example, is the Freedom Convoy helping in advancing the causes of the working class? That's one question that I would ask. Anyone can answer it.
Go, Rob.
You already know what I'm going to say. I don't think it is. I think that the things that they're asking for is generally like harmful to the health of the working class. I understand that there's like genuine concerns that the working class should be concerned with, and we as the left should be concerned with addressing those issues in a socialist way, in a way that can reach the people, and in a way that is actually effective. But generally, I think that it provides a platform for like measures that do more harm to generally working people.
Okay, someone else want to add something to that?
I do, but I'll let someone else go, please, if someone else wants to comment.
Yeah, I'll get in for a sec. Or Saheli, do you want to go?
No, you do.
I wanted to comment on how it's kind of struck a chord in a deeper debate in the US, and I don't know about Canada, but just as far as like, supporting like worker class consciousness in the United States. So I think there was already kind of like this divide there that got kind of stoked by the Freedom Convoy.
Yeah, I would say it is important to understand maybe the radicalization of the working class that might be happening, that's exacerbated and increased by these demonstrations, the politicization and political education of the masses, who take up debates like we're having today, and many debates in even in mainstream media, where these contradictions between U.S. and Canadian media were revealed. These all might lead to advances in working class consciousness. I found very interesting the statements by Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois, who is a leader of the Quebec Solidaire Party, which is a leftist Quebec Sovereigntist party. And he got up there in the National Assembly, and he was astonished that the Quebec Solidaire's condemnation of the trucker convoy was even being questioned. He couldn't believe that he was even being asked whether or not Quebec Solidaire stood behind the trucker convoy, because he said from the very start, Quebec Solidaire has stood with the workers and with the working class to increase safety measures so that people could be protected from the virus, whether it was because they were forced to go to work. If they could go to work, well, then let's find ways to protect them in the workplace. And secondarily, if they lost their employment, let's find ways to protect them so that they wouldn't lose their houses, and their families wouldn't go hungry, and so on. So he put it really well, and I'm just going to continue to say that Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois was one of the key spokesmen for what I view as a giant and clearly socialist movement that happened called the Maple Spring in Quebec, where hundreds of thousands of students and workers mobilized across the province for months. 6 months, I believe this went on for. 40 people were injured. One student lost an eye. 3,500 were arrested. This is what a legitimate uprising looks like. It's not 10,000 people occupying Ottawa. Again, not to say that there weren't some legitimate concerns there, but you would think that people in Canada have never demonstrated before, by the way some of the mainstream media wrote about this stuff, and by the way it was received in across the world, saying, oh, Trudeau's going to get overthrown and so on, and isn't this great? In Quebec, it did lead to the end of the Liberal government at that time, and the election of a new government. And it was a sustained, hugely supported movement that wasn't just limited to students. I and hundreds of thousands of other Quebecers participated in so many different ways in protests that went on every single night, and that were characterized by mass arrests, police brutality, tear gas being shot directly into people's eyes, police dogs biting people. And these things happened literally every night for months in Montreal and Quebec City. So
in what year was that, Steve?
It's important in context. Sorry, go on.
In what year was that?
That's 2012, the Maple Spring, it's called. And again, I just blather on all that to because Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois, this politician of Quebec Solidaire, was launched into the political spectrum in Quebec because he was one of the leaders of those protests. We'll see what happens with the trucker convoy leaders. We'll see if Pamela Leach or Pat King ends up being, a legitimate politician in the next few years because of this. It's possible.
One question. Is there was not a single measure taken by the Canadian government to improve the conditions of work of the truckers, at least as a result of the convoy? Do you know about something like that?
If I can interject again, this is another really important discussion. At the same time as they were moving in to arrest and demobilize the convoy, at the same time, provinces across the country were announcing an end to the vaccine mandates. Of course, they inevitably said that it had nothing to do with the convoy, but in mid-February, like dominoes, they were all, and they're mostly conservative leaders of the provinces, but they were all announcing that the vaccine mandates or the vaccine passport, the use of the vaccine passport would be phased out by mid-March, and that restrictions would be lifted. So we've seen a sea change across Canada that's affected all of our lives, because now
so that might be a good outcome out of the convoy, right?
This might be characterized as a success of the convoy, and again, it's a very long discussion that we could have, but it's important also to think of the political dynamics in Canada, where most provinces, including Quebec, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, every province except BC, every major province is led by again, let's just say the liberal, a conservative party, right? So they're opposed to Trudeau. Although in Canada, the parties in provinces are not the same as the federal parties technically, so it's a bit of a simplification. But politically, it gave them a leverage to lift the mandates at this point. Again, if mainstream media was hyping the demands of the trucker convoy participants as legitimate, this gave a sort of leverage to the conservative politicians to respond to them. Although, again, in a way that they never ever acknowledged that they were responding to this. The opposite, all the premiers came out generally against the trucker convoy, although some showed some measure of support for some of the concerns.
Another question, Steve, another question. Is it helping? I mean, is the Freedom Convoy helping to show the cracks within Canadian plutocracy, imperialism? This is a question for any one of you guys.
I'll answer.
I mean, do you see something like that?
To me, but please afterwards, Rob especially maybe can speak on this. I would say quite simply, yes, it is. If fascism is capitalism in decay, maybe it's exaggerated to call this fascism, but these cracks are revealed by a crumbling of the imperialist structure, Canada's relative weakness compared to other countries. As you know, as a vassal of the United States, we go down with them, and the capitalist system's inability to deal with a social crisis such as COVID.
Someone else? No one?
Okay. I think you have a point to call it fascist. I mean, the whole like sorry, I forgot what it's called. The paramilitary presence, or like these like other like non forces that aren't quite with the federal government. Just going back to the last question for a second, I remember hearing that there was a lot of that even some of the truckers were being negatively impacted by this convoy, like the truckers who wanted to continue working, and that a lot of them are actually vaccinated, and that it was kind of taking on a tone of like a minority of the truckers who maybe like own their own companies or own their own trucks were the ones that were able to like heavily participate in this. Meanwhile, some people who were just trying to work day to day were being the ones who had to pay for it. And I don't see it as a substitute to like political education or trying to form like proper left-wing movements. Because coming from like someone who was born in Canada, part of the diaspora, and like, you know, all these like migrant communities, where people are like quite like lost at an identity level. And then so just to see like how fast something like this can spread and how fast people jump onto it, I think it speaks to like the society and like a symptom of just like this neoliberal haven that has popped up in Canada.
And also I would say that, do you want to say something, Sahi?
No, you do.
Okay, I would say that the whole convoy and the crisis that the government and the police allowed it to create also show how fragile the Canadian economy is. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm not sure if that's the way I see it from here, and that's what I'm sharing it with you, because maybe I'm wrong, but all this paralysis in the Canadian economy as a result of the convoy also is a signal of something wrong there. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm just sharing these thoughts that I have, not only between the paralysis, not only in relation to the paralysis within Canada, but also within the trade with the US. And it's incredible that at some point Canada do something after Biden talks to Trudeau and let him know that that the gringos that are not going to allow that to keep happening or something like that, which is crazy.
If I may ask something, that wasn't the Canadian economy, like most other economies of the world, already paralyzed because of the very long lockdowns and all the other measures? Like,
That's
economies were already paralyzed, right? I mean, what more did the convoy do? It could be that at the time of the convoy, there were some openings, some things were opening up in most parts of the world, and also probably in Canada, and there was this cross-border trade with the US. But despite that, I mean, what impact, how much impact did it have on the economy compared to what 2 years of pandemic already had?
I got it. Listen, the last question. We need to close.
Like, he could tell us. I mean, I don't know.
You want to say something, Steve?
Yeah, again, there's a lot of things that could be said. I would love to revisit the sort of color revolution Guarimba discussion, where the trucker convoy, and again, I realize it's an exaggeration. We had some compas that wrote an article for us that compared the events in Canada to the Guarimbas in Venezuela, which was pretty controversial. I thought the article itself was excellent. It raised all of the it raised a lot of key points and recalled a lot of uncontested facts. But the characterization of these events as Guarimbas is, a hyperbole, let's say, because the level of violence was just not comparable at all, as the authors acknowledged.
Yes.
But it's easy for us to view this, color revolutions when they occur against someone like Yanukovych in Ukraine, who's, a supporter, clearly a Russian-aligned leader. But it's a little more complex for us when we see this narrative used to try to explain something that happens in a clear U.S. vassal state like Canada, which is led by Trudeau, who is a spineless lackey of U.S. imperialism,
and the son of Fidel.
But yeah, right. But again, this is, I mean, that's exactly it. Let's try to be realistic also, that there could be a leader in Canada that was more supportive of the US. And, it reminds us of the demands that Saudi Arabia is putting on the US right now. But there could be a leader in Canada that fully deployed troops into Afghanistan and joined the Afghanistan war openly, as Canada did not. There could be a leader in Canada that was way more opposed to Chinese companies. Let's not forget the case of Meng, who was arrested on behalf of the US, and then she was released back to China. We can only imagine how much that might have angered the US. Trudeau closed the borders with the US when COVID began. We can imagine that would have angered the US. As Rob said, let's not forget too that Canada has a public healthcare system that many, or I'll say some supporters of the trucker convoy were calling this healthcare system a criminal enterprise, which used the legal apparatus of Canada to force vaccinations on our public, and that the Charter of Rights providing us with social health care should be completely eliminated and rewritten. So basically calling for a privatization of the Canadian healthcare system, a complete
I didn't know
privatization
that.
of it.
Which has been happening, no?
Of
That's
course,
weird.
it's slowly happening, but it could happen faster. And lastly, let's recall how Trump got on his pulpit there and called Trudeau a far left lunatic when you know I guess when the trucker convoy started. So yes, there's a lot of complicity and cooperation between these two countries, but there's more complex things at play. The Trump regime is not in power anymore in the US, and this can't be characterized as a typical color revolution where the US government, as you had pointed out, Jesus, is the ones funding the movement. There's no doubt that that didn't happen here. We don't have any evidence that the National Endowment of Democracy or USAID funded the Freedom Convoy, but we have a lot of evidence that Republican aligned politicians supported it across the board, that private businesses from across the southern states, particularly Texas, funded it. One reliable source here said that the majority of the up to $20 million that was raised for the Freedom Convoy. Again, when we contrast this with actual grassroots movements, there's no comparison. We're talking millions and millions of dollars to buy Canadian flags with and whatnot, that was sent to these organizations that came mostly from the US, credible sources said. So is this maybe can be characterized maybe as a color revolution that's being funded by a regime that's not in power right now? Yeah, okay. I'm done.
The last question that I have.
I think Saheli actually had something she wanted to add on this last topic too.
No, actually, no. Actually, I was just going to say is just like you were saying that, well, I don't know how can a regime that's not in power can fund a color revolution. I know they're dirty rich people, so they can. Like it could be a personal or a group initiative, but not a government one. So just like you said, calling it a color revolution would be an exaggeration. Just like calling it guarimbas would also be an exaggeration, because of course there was not that level of violence, and it was not like this was, I mean, it was a part of the right wing against another part of the right wing, and not like the guarimbas in Venezuela. So that is a big difference. But from that, I mean, I won't be calling it a color revolution. And I was just going to say that Yanukovych, you said Russian aligned leader, he was sort of aligned, sort of vacillating. I think the Sekar called this sort of policy the multi-vector policy, and many countries that were once part of the USSR or part of that bloc followed or still follow, is that they try to maintain relations with Russia and at the same time with Europe and also with the US, and they are more likely to go with the US in case of foreign policies. On the other hand, they're more likely to receive aid from Russia, and it's true that many of these former USSR countries still continue to receive a lot of money, not as aid, but as other things like infrastructure. A lot of infrastructure, especially in the Central Asian republics, are from the Soviet period, and their maintenance still needs that, software and hardware, which are still produced in Russia, and it's necessary. And I'm saying this from experience, my personal experience, not in the Central Asian republics, but in India, because a lot of infrastructure are from that time. Like most of our heavy industries were done with Soviet money and technology. So India still has to buy those technologies, continue to buy those technologies from Russia. This is one of the reasons that it cannot really go against Russia, but it's also like its foreign policy over the last 30 years is getting more aligned with the US. It's becoming a vassal state in Asia against the US, a sort of junior partner like Pakistan was until very recently. So that is the sort of policy that Yanukovych also followed. went with Russia and went with US, vacillated between the two, also wanted to maintain relations with the EU. And it was like the color revolution happened when he had canceled that agreement with the EU. So, I mean, I wouldn't call him exactly Russian aligned, but I won't call him a US vassal either, like the present one. So that's another point I wanted to make. Like, yeah, like you said, these are simplifications, and the models from one country cannot be applied in another to explain things.
Listen, and this is the last question. Is the convoy? Did the convoy somehow portray or show the Canadian plutocracy? I mean, show the cracks within the Canadian plutocracy, or it was more? I mean, I'm asking what you think about this question. I mean, was it that, or was it like more what some people call like public opinion distraction? How do you see it? Don't do it all at the same time.
I'm just really trying to like take in the question, you know what I mean? Because like,
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes it's like, I don't know how to say the metaphor, but the convoy itself, in the way I see it, and I could be wrong, you know, is a result of these kind of splits. If we assess that there is moneyed interest behind it that is like backing in ways that we can't understand this as a grassroots movement, I wouldn't say that it's exposing these contradictions between the oligarchy. It's a result of it, you know. And if the question is like, is this movement geared or oriented to expose that? I would say no again. But movements like this are inherent in that political strife between like the bourgeoisie that we should expose those movements as. Like, we need to have a movement that is like, look at that. Look at them funding this fake ass, like, well, let me not say fake, but look at how people move their money to foment like this dissent, this kind of like AstroTurf dissent in a way. So we have to expose that narrative, but the convoy itself isn't set out to do that, if that makes sense.
Yes, I get it. Someone want to add something? Dana, Saheli, Kahlil.
I just want to interject just for a minute to correct what I said before when I said that it was Canada that hadn't supported the war on Afghanistan. They fully did. It was the war on Iraq. I was mistaken, where Canada did not officially declare war on Iraq.
Okay.
Please, someone on this subject of cracks in the plutocracy. Saheli?
No, I wasn't thinking of that. I mean, did it really show cracks in the plutocracy? I mean, the people who are in Canada would be, or who are know more about it, would be a better position to talk about it. So this is not really that sort of what we call a workers' protest. So I don't know, but like Rob said, I would support him in the sense that one can replicate its methods, some of its methods, to hold a protest with demands that should have been raised, like the ones that I said earlier, that about homelessness, or the ones that you say about indigenous nations, their lands, etc. So, I mean, not just movements. I think I had told this about before also, that it's not just carrying out movements or organizing movements the only thing. One also needs to make it visible. So how to visibilize the huge movements, because mainstream media won't do it like they did for the trucker convoy. Everybody was talking about it, like it was a sensation all over the world, even on the other side of the world. So yes, how, without the help from mainstream media or without funding from either US Republicans who are not in power or the Democrats who are, like without any funding like that, how to use grassroots funding and support and use alternative media in the same way in order to visibilize a movement so that it becomes a sensation in other countries also, like people can see it. So like there are legitimate demands everywhere that are also in Canada. I mean, in Canada, in US, not just that, in third world countries also there are many similar demands, so that people of all these places, like all over the world, can see how similar people are. I mean, working class people, poor people, students, etc., whatever you say, how similar their lives are, how similar their problems are, so that there can be more solidarity with real working class movements and not distractions.
Go ahead, Steve. Kick it like this.
I mean, I'm not sure I have that much more to add on this this topic. Just to say again that I think it's important to contextualize and promote and to spread awareness of these conflicts and splits on the right within the capitalist class. Let's say we could call it the right, but between liberals and conservatives, or between Democrats and Republicans. And it's one thing I think that we learn from following Venezuelan politics is we see in a country which does have a socialist leadership, that does have socialist media outlets, we see articles that expose the web of factionalization on the right among Guaido and the MUD and the AD and all the splits within these parties that keep happening over and over, that illustrate that it's not just the left that has, you know, disagreements and splits. That's how a lot of us in the West, we always think, oh, the left has always been divided and conquered. I mean, and I'm not saying that's entirely untrue, but the right is also susceptible to being divided and conquered. So, you know, let's bring attention to these splits.
Yes, I got your point.
I echo that sentiment. I think that can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really want to echo that sentiment. I think it's a proactive and a materialist approach that these things are going to happen. The right has all these resources at their disposal. We have a duty to expose it and put a platform on it and make it accessible to people to show what's really going on.
That's true. That's true. I believe that we already passed our time. I don't know if someone want to say a last word. Steve, Rob, Anna.
You keep inviting me. I mean, we're going to be here all day because there's just so many things to talk about. Maybe to close, I would just talk a little bit about the timing and the failure of the trucker convoy in the US, you know, partially because in the US they don't have such extreme mandates in place, and because of the Ukraine war also, let's be honest. The timing of this demonstration in Canada was so perfect, and I think that's why it captured not just Canadian media, but people in Canada, legitimately, that friends of mine that just wanted to go to Ottawa to party, because there was nowhere else in this country where people could get together in public and listen to music and have a good time. The timing was amazing also because when we look at the context of the Canadian election that happened in late 2021, Trudeau timed this election. There was a reason he called an election so quickly, only a couple of years, was it even 2 years since his last election. And to me, that reason was because they knew, the Liberals knew that the economy was going to crater, as they say. They knew that the social programs, which here is called the CRB and the CERB, the programs that they put in place essentially to pay people to stay home and to protect workers that lost their jobs. They knew this stuff was going to get lifted. And sure enough, it was lifted just about a month after the election. So the timing of Trudeau's election was very precise. And the timing of this demonstration was, if they had waited another month, it never would have worked. And if they had done it a few months earlier, where people were still receiving the social security benefits of the CRB, it also would not have worked. It wouldn't have worked during the summer when people were allowed to go outside. It wouldn't have worked during a point where we were loosening the mandates and restrictions already. But because of Omicron, which came as a surprise to many in Canada, it hit us right during the holidays and the New Year's. It was incredibly frustrating on a social level for the cohesion of people that are just desperate to get together with family members, to interact in social places. Again, we can't forget about that social aspect. Anyways, I guess what I'm emphasizing, and this applies to the left also, is the things that we can learn from a successful movement. And one of them is timing. You have to strike when the iron is hot, and strategize a timing on your movement where maybe mainstream media will be interested in picking up the story for whatever reason. We can contrast that with the timing of the Shutdown Canada movement that happened. I believe it started in January or February, really to gain steam. January or February 2020, which was the last big Wet'suwet'en land defender mobilization against Coastal GasLink and their expropriation of Indigenous lands. Many thousands of people participated in solidarity of the land defenders across Canada and blockaded all sorts of train, lots of transportation, but mostly the train railways that were blockaded, that severely disrupted the economy. Mainstream media, and we were even writing about it in a Venezuelan outlet, but international media started writing about it. The surveys in Canada indicated that a larger proportion of Canadians supported the blockades than actually had voted for Trudeau, 36% or 30% or whatever it is. And then COVID came, and in March, all of a sudden there was a shutdown. Indigenous communities were obviously affected most by COVID because they're vulnerable populations. They don't have access to healthcare as well as other communities do here. And the timing of this Shutdown Canada, how ironic is it that a movement was called Shutdown Canada, and what happened 2 months later, Canada did get shut down, and it had nothing to do with that movement. The timing was terrible, unfortunately, for that movement. So it's interesting, I think, to see the impact of 1 week or 1 month or 1 year difference here or there makes to the success and the impact of a social movement.
I agree with you. I agree with you in the thing about the timing, and also in the thing about the lockdowns and the restriction measures in the US not being comparable to the ones in Canada that were exaggerated. But I still believe that right-wingers might put the movement in the freezer and wait for the right moment to deploy it in the US and, do their circus there. Maybe I'm wrong, I'm not sure, but I believe that that's a possibility. But of course, it always will be depend on the timing that they do it, as you say, Steve, that their success is going to depend on that. That's what I'm trying to say. I believe that we have to close the conversation
about the timing before you close it up here. It's interesting
Go
to
ahead.
think, though, that this was done in the winter, which is normally not a good protest season. And it was pretty funny to see demonstrators outside in -15 or -20 weather. It's a big factor when we think of
That's
Ukraine,
true.
also in northern countries. We have a protest season, and this trucker convoy event happened outside of the protest season. So an
That's true.
interesting thing.
Yeah, I
That's
think
true.
that is why a lot of people might have thought that was like a desperate thing. Like they were in a desperate situation. That's why, I mean, some people who otherwise might not have supported it did. And also due to the fact that there was suddenly a huge protest in the heart of the capital of Canada.
Yes.
And again,
Yes, that's true.
the contextualization
I just wanna.
is really. I mean, I've read that there were between 3,000 to 18,000 demonstrators at its peak in Ottawa, and let's take the highest number, which is a number that let's say supporters of the convoy, 18,000. Let's even say there were 20,000 people there. Again, we can contrast this to a Chavista demonstration in Caracas, where you might have easily 10 times that amount of people that come down, or we can contrast it with the student protests, the anti-austerity protests that we had in 2015, or even the Shutdown Canada demonstrations, which had mobilizations all across the country. So I think it's interesting to put that in context, just in terms of sheer numbers too. By using trucks, they were able to strategically magnify the impact of relatively low numbers of demonstrators to have a huge impact in terms of blocking traffic, the noise they were able to generate, and it was out of proportion to the amount of actual support on the ground. Not to again minimize the actual grievances that people expressed through this demonstration, but wasn't really that many people.
I just have to close the chat, guys. I just wanted to say before closing that we didn't want to provide like solutions for the thing. We just want to air our point of view and share it with you, to let you know that we have like different opinions, different point of views, or maybe similar point of views on certain issues. This is going to be our first talk, but we are planning to have like monthly talks like this. So we invite you to follow it. We're gonna, besides, live stream it on Facebook. We're gonna, upload the videos to YouTube in order to like make a series of discussions like this to happen every month. And we invite you to participate. We thank you all for watching us, and we wish you the best. Thank you for following us.
I wanted to add also, before we cut out, that all the content of Orinoco Tribune can be seen on our website, orinocotribune.com, and that the Caracas-based outlet is entirely independent of all organizations, government organizations or business organizations, and we rely 100% on the donations of our generous contributors in order to keep functioning. So please, if you're interested in the work that we do, share our content and consider making a donation, which you can see quite clearly the link for that on the homepage.
That's true. That's true. Bye-bye, guys. Please donate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending.